Gold. For centuries, it has captured the human imagination. Of course, during the Great Age of Exploration, mountains of it were discovered, prospected, and looted, and the only way to get it back to the mother country was by ship. Over hundreds of years, countless ships went missing or were destroyed, carrying tons of treasure. Some have been found, leading to lengthy court battles as different parties stake their claim. But others are still out there, undiscovered at the bottom of the ocean, waiting for some lucky group to stumble across them and make a fortune. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs, and here are 4 of history's most valuable shipwrecks. The city of Cairo. Now, when people think of sunken treasures and lost fortunes, their minds probably turn to the golden age of sail and pirate ships. But the truth is that a great number of modern shipwrecks and steamships have disappeared carrying a fortune in gold and silver, and one of them was the SS City of Cairo. The ship was built during the First World War, a humbly sized passenger ship for the Ellerman Line, around 450 feet or 137 meters long, and 8,000 gross registered tons. She had an uneventful career until 1929, when the ship hit and sank a tug with its propeller. But unfortunately for the handsome ship city of Cairo, things were only going to get worse. Requisitioned during the Second World War as a supply ship, she was tasked with ferrying cargo to Britain through waters infested with German submarines. In October 1942, the ship set off from Bombay via South Africa, and loaded aboard were 101 passengers, including 28 women and 19 children, along with 10 gunners, to man the ship's modest defences. Down below deck though, the ship was loaded with 7,000 tons of general cargo, like iron, timber and cotton, but stored deep in the hull were also 2,000 boxes of silver coins. And we'll get back to these later. The ship sailed a zigzag course to avoid the enemy, but unfortunately her old engines were running inefficiently and smoke poured out thick from her funnel, making the ship visible for miles. At 9:36 p.m. on November the 6th, 1942, the ship's luck ran out. A single torpedo slammed into the hull and water poured in. The ship's captain ordered his vessel abandoned and the lifeboats were lowered. Remarkably, only 6 people were lost in the sinking, and all the women and children were got into the boats. Sadly, the ship's wireless radioman remained at his post to broadcast a distress signal, but a second torpedo detonated and killed him. The ship sank to the sea floor, leaving behind a few bits of wreckage and the lifeboats bobbing on the surface. But then, out of the ocean roared the conning tower of a German U-boat. The U-68, commanded by Karl Friedrich Merten, stopped alongside the lifeboats, and the German captain emerged. He chatted with the survivors in the lifeboats, asking for the ship's name, cargo, and destination. And he gave the survivors the course to the nearest land, St. Helena, some 500 miles or 800 kilometers away. With that, he said good night and sorry for sinking you, turned away, and climbed back down into his conning tower. The U-68 sailed off, and Merton thought the survivors were doomed. Over the next 3 weeks, the lifeboats battled the elements in an epic open-top voyage to St. Helena. Dozens of the survivors of the sinking died in the lifeboats from exposure, but remarkably, all the boats were rescued after they'd lost contact from each other for over a month, with one even travelling close to 2,000 miles, or 3,200 kilometers to Brazil. Out of 302 people aboard, only 195 survived. The city of Cairo was all but forgotten until about 2011, when an expedition located the twisted hulk of the ship at a depth of 17,000 feet, more than 5 kilometers deep, at the bottom of the ocean. Locked away within the hull were those 2,000 boxes of silver coins, a whopping 100 tons in total, valued today at around £35 million or $50 million. It was a fortune too sweet to pass up, and despite the challenges presented by the wreck's great depth, a salvage operation was organised. This was the deepest marine salvage exercise ever attempted. By 2013, most of the silver had been dragged 5 kilometers up from the ocean floor to see daylight again for the first time in 7 decades. The end of the story is a bit anticlimactic though. The silver rupees were recovered, then hurriedly shipped back to the UK, where they were melted down and sold, with the revenue split between the British Treasury and the salvage team. Still, it was a great achievement, the deepest recovery of treasure from a ship that was ever successfully completed. Las Cinco Chagas. The ship was a carrack, a type of sailing cargo ship, and it was sunk in a bitter battle off the Azores. Now, what it was carrying has tempted treasure hunters across the globe for decades, but it remains one of history's most alluring, unfound, forgotten shipwrecks. Cinco Chagas was built in the 1500s. She made her maiden voyage in 1593, but was found to be both overloaded and in generally poor condition. Crammed aboard her for her final voyage were around 1,400 people, including 270 slaves. She had been sent on a special mission. A secret cargo was loaded aboard that needed urgent delivery to the King of Spain and Portugal, Philip II. The Cinco Chagas set off, but global events would see the ship targeted by a bloodthirsty enemy. The English Royal Navy was hunting Spanish and Portuguese ships, as this was the height of the Anglo-Spanish War. A year earlier, the Portuguese carrack Madre de Dios had been captured in an engagement, and the British victors were shocked to discover mountains of jewels, pearls, and gold stored below in huge treasure chests. This treasure is thought to have been worth as much as half of the total English treasury at the time, and maybe the second largest treasure ever. The British Earl of Cumberland wanted in on the action and privately funded the assembly of a small fleet to go and capture their own Portuguese and Spanish treasure ships. Out they sailed, and in June 1594, a huge Portuguese ship was spotted on the horizon. It was the Cinco Chagas. The Portuguese and British ships closed on each other and prepared for battle. At noon, they exchanged broadsides and volleys of musket fire. The fight went on all day, with the British trying to board, but the Portuguese desperately fighting them off. Then a boarding party attacked the ship's undefended stern, and it was all over. An eyewitness remembered that the sea was purple with blood dripping from the scuppers, and the decks cluttered with the dead, and the fire raging in some parts of the ships, and the air so filled with smoke that not only we could sometimes not see each other, but we could not recognize each other. It had been a bitter fight to the end, but the British were finally in control of the ship. They began to systematically execute any surrendered or struggling Portuguese, sparing only the women and children, but then the smoke began to get thicker. The ship was burning out of control, and it had to be abandoned. The British ships were still tied alongside the Cinco Chagas, and they worked desperately to free them, and then just after dawn, the fire reached the ship's powder magazine and blew it apart. The explosion was enormous. Hundreds were killed, including 35 Englishmen who were still on board. But in the end, only 16 of those aboard Cinco Chagas had survived. Portuguese crew plucked from the ocean told the English captors a wild tale. They had been carrying a fortune, 22 treasure chests of diamonds, rubies, and pearls, and over 2 million silver coins. That would value the ship's cargo today at between $15 and $20 billion. The Cinco Chagas had been on a special mission to transport the fortune to the king, and if successful, the captain would have been made a viceroy of the Indies. The story has become legend, but the exact location of the ship's wreck has been lost to time. Estimates place it at a depth of about a mile, or just shy of 2 kilometers deep. It has attracted treasure hunters and expeditions for years. Partly owing to the depth and the fact that she was blown completely apart, the wreck and the around $20 billion of treasure remain to be found. The SS Central America. Now, this next vessel has earned the nickname of the Ship of Gold for good reason, because it was lost at the height of the Californian gold rush. Her name was the SS Central America. Central America was a 280-foot or 85-meter long paddle steamer that operated between Panama and the eastern US coast in the 1850s. After just 5 years of service, the ship set out for New York City loaded with a fortune in gold, 9 tons of it, all prospected during the Californian gold rush. It was meant to be a rudimentary voyage, but luck was not on Central America's side. On September 9th, 1857, a monster hurricane roared in with winds howling up to 105 miles per hour, or 170 kilometers per hour. The ship's sails were torn to shreds, and she labored through mountainous waves, but the sea broke over her bows and she began to take on water. Her single boiler gave out, shutting down the crucial bilge pumps that were working to get water out of the ship. But slowly, she began to settle by the stern and sink. With the sea churning around them, the crew flew a distress flag, but it was a hopeless situation. No rescue could possibly come. Passengers and crew formed a human chain with buckets, working hard to bail their ship out, but it was a losing battle. Attempts to get the boiler lit again failed, and all hope seemed lost, but then, the next morning, 2 ships were sighted in the distance. 100 passengers, mainly women and children, loaded into lifeboats and set off, but most remained behind. The storm wouldn't subside, and finally, the Central America sank, stern first. 425 people were lost. 50 survivors were plucked from the water, and over a week after the sinking, 3 more were found adrift in a lifeboat. For the time, this was one of the largest losses of life at sea in American shipping. Down with her sank almost $1 billion worth of gold. In 1988, a research effort rediscovered the lost ship and began to recover the gold from her hull. In all, some $150 million worth of the stuff was pulled up. A single ingot from the wreck sold for $8 million by itself. But then came the insurance companies, 39 of them in total, who argued that they had paid damages out back in 1857 when the ship was lost, and that they had a right to the recovered gold. What followed was a lengthy legal process of suing and countersuing. The Discovery team was awarded 92% of the profits. But then, years later in 2005, the expedition leader, Tommy Thompson, was sued by his own team and investors for holding out on them. He ran away and went into hiding in 2012, put around $4 million in offshore accounts. He was located 3 years later in 2015 and extradited to Ohio. He agreed to surrender some 500 gold coins, and investors were awarded millions in compensation in 2018, some 30 years after the wreck had actually been found. The original expedition had only excavated some 5% of the ship's wreck, and tons of gold remained locked down in the hull at the bottom of the ocean. Recovery efforts are ongoing to this day, but aside from the gold, more fascinating things were pulled up from the wreck. This included a series of early photographs called ambrotypes and some other daguerreotypes featuring women and children, all perfectly preserved at the bottom of the ocean for 130 years. A haunting reminder of the human lives lost when the Central America sank. San Jose. Now, this next treasure ship was sunk in battle, but unlike the Cinco Chagas, her treasures have actually been found, leading to a bitter dispute over who actually owns the wreck. In 1708, the San Jose, a massive galleon, a kind of warship, was serving as the flagship of a treasure fleet tasked with taking tons of gold looted from the New World back to Spain. See, Spain's galleons were purpose-built for this, with both huge holds capable of loading tons of treasure to dozens of massive cannons so they could put up a fight if intercepted. This was at the height of the War of Spanish Succession, and on June 8, 1708, the flagship San Jose and its fleet of 14 merchant ships lumbered into a British naval squadron. San Jose was one of 3 escorting warships, but they were also the biggest, so they carried the treasure between them. The British had figured that this was the case, and in the ensuing battle they actually focused their attacks on San Jose and the 2 others. As the battle dragged on, one of the treasure-laden Spanish escort galleons escaped into the night, leaving the San Jose and the only other escort to stave off the 4 British warships. But suddenly, without warning, after only an hour of fighting, San Jose was torn apart by a massive explosion as its powder magazine detonated. Of the 600 crew, only 11 survived, and the ship was sent in pieces to the bottom of the ocean. The ship's log and cargo manifest estimated that she was carrying a mountain of treasure with 7 million Spanish pesos, today worth some $4 billion US. The ship quickly earned the nickname the Holy Grail of Shipwrecks, and efforts were made to find her and secure the gold. In 1981, a private expedition group found the ship lying some 3,000 feet or 914 meters deep. But just when they thought they had become billionaires, the Colombian government stepped in. The wreck was located in their waters and was therefore the property of the nation of Colombia. The expedition team offered a 65-35 split with the government, but it refused. The organization was allowed, after some deliberation, a 5% finder's fee, which was then itself going to be taxed at 45%. They sued the Colombian government for this in 2007, and the Colombian court agreed on a 50-50 split. Then the government refused to act on its own court's ruling. Investors from the original search will never see a cent recovered from the ship. In 2015, the wreck was revisited and located by the Colombian Navy. She was identified by her cannons, which featured prominent engravings of dolphins. The location of the wreck has been classified as a state secret, but released imagery from the sea floor shows thousands of gold pieces of 8 scattered in the silt. In 2015, the Spanish government stepped forward and claimed ownership of the wreck, but since the wreck lies in Colombian waters, there's very little they can do. Some parts of the Colombian government claim the treasure is part of their country's heritage and should be preserved intact in a museum, while others think it should simply be ingested by the nation's bank. Indigenous groups have also come forward demanding a share since much of the gold had been plundered from their ancestors. Just this month, in November 2023, it was announced that San Jose is going to be razed before 2026. What exactly the plan is for this historically significant wreck remains to be seen, but hopefully the move isn't just an attempt at recovering the billions in lost treasure, but it will also be a venture aimed at bringing the ship's incredibly preserved artifacts to the public so we can learn more about her colourful past. The whole thing, honestly, is a complete mess, and while minds are still made up and decisions are made over what should actually happen, the Colombian Navy still patrols the wreck, guarding the thousands of gold coins that litter the ocean floor, waiting for anyone bold enough to try and step forward and take them. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we get new videos out weekly. If you want to support my work and get really cool perks like behind the scenes and early access, please visit my Patreon in the link in the description below, or sign up as a YouTube member. Come and join the crew. As always, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you again next time.